Okay, so today we are going to be painting, so I want to take a minute to walk you through what supplies you are going to need. So the first thing you're going to want to grab is like a piece of newspaper, a piece of scrap paper, a piece of cardboard, something that you can put under your painting to help keep your table surface clean. Okay, the next thing that you're going to need are your paints. They should be in a Ziploc bag in your art kit, so we're going to take and set those to the side. You're going to need a paint palette. You're going to need your two paint brushes. So one should be wooden and one should be blue. The wooden one, you're actually going to open up your watercolors and take it out of your watercolor set. You are going to want your paint palette that's in your art kit as well. You will also want to grab a container of water. It could be an old plastic cup you have. It could be like a sour cream container. Mine is an old peanut butter container, or like even like a Solo cup or whatever you have to put rinse your brushes in. You're gonna want some paper towel. You'll be ready to start painting. Now, one thing I want to point out, it's just kind of luck of the draw what colors of paint you got. If you really don't like this paint, you are welcome to go out and purchase your own paint to use. We're just trying to figure out the best solution, not knowing if we would make it into hybrid. So this was the best solution that we came up with, were these little waterproof containers of paint. We need to conserve our paint so that you don't run out, so we want to make sure that we're not wasting a bunch of paint. If you have your own paint brushes, if you have your own paint palette, if you have your own paints that you would like to use, that is fine. However, for this assignment, we're going to keep it monochromatic, which means one color with tints and shades of that color. So you'll pick one color and then you can use black and white, and that's it for this painting. We are working with tempera paint, and the reason we're working with tempera paint is it is less likely to stain if you happen to get it on a surface. Just using a wet paper towel, it should wipe up. It should technically wash out of clothing, but sometimes it can leave a faint color, so make sure that you are being extra careful. Don't wear your favorite outfit the day that we're doing this for class. So for right now, we're going to ignore the color wheel. We're going to do this with watercolor later on. So right now, we're just focused on this part of our worksheet here. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get some paint, and I'm going to scoop some paint here into my, dip my brush and take another small scoop of white. So I'm not using a lot of paint. Okay, and then I'm going to set my brush on my paint palette, and then I'm going to grab some red. So my color that I'm working with is red, and I'm going to just take my brush, my blue brush this time, and I'm going to do a dash of red here, a little bit there, and I'm going to put some right on top. I also use the flat parts of my palette. You do not want to dip your brush. So like if I do not want to dip my white brush into my containers of paint, we do all of our mixing right on here. So I'm going to set my red brush right here. Now I'm going to grab my white brush. So the first thing we want to practice is how to neatly paint. So I'm going to wipe off the extra paint here, and I'm going to just use the paint that's on my brush, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to paint this top square white. I know it seems silly, it's a white piece of paper, but we're going to practice our painting skills. We want to see if we can stay in the lines. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my blue brush and I'm going to paint where it says pure color. That's where I'm going to paint my red. So I'm going to wipe off any extra here, and I'm going to go ahead and paint over the words pure color. So I'm working really hard to just use the edge of my brush to keep it within that outline there. Go slowly. And if you don't feel like it's solid enough, some of the paint gets a little watery when it sits, what you could do is take and dip your brush, and sometimes you have to let it dry first, but you can dip your brush and give it a second coat, and you'll see more of that pure color. The reason we put this color here is we want to make a value scale going from lightest to this red color here. So these will be called tints. So tints are when you add your color to white. You always start with the lightest color as your largest amount. So here we're working with white as our largest color of paint, and we're going to add little bits of red to it to go from white to light pink to dark pink to red. Okay, so I'm going to take and dip my brush Notice I'm dipping my white brush in the red on my paint palette. Do not dip it directly into your container. You would contaminate all that paint. So I dip it in there and then I take and I mix it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and test it on my sheet here. Now I think that's kind of a big jump. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rinse my brush real quick. I'm gonna rinse it out really good. I'm gonna dry it so that it's a clean brush, and I'm gonna scoop a little bit of white paint to use for if I need to correct any. So I put a little bit of white paint here on the flat area. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm gonna wipe off the extra in the next one, and I'm going to add just a little bit of white to that pink to lighten it. It was just a little bit too dark for me, and if I feel like I need just a little more, I could add just a little more. So I want this to be a pretty light pink. And so now I can kind of just paint back over where I started. So here's my first tint. It's a nice light pink. Now I'm gonna go to the next one. I'm gonna dip my brush in red. That's a lot of red. So I'm gonna wipe some of that off. And I'm gonna mix it with this here. And you'll see it's a darker pink. So each of these, so it should be about half red, half white here. So each of these should look a little bit different than the one on either side of it. But you can see it's starting to get darker as I add more red to it. And then for this last one, I'm gonna take quite a bit of red. So it's gonna be like 3/4 red, 1/4 white. So then I'm going to paint in here. I think I could probably even add just a little bit more red to it. Again, we're learning how to work with these brushes we have. So take your time, go slowly, just use the tip along the edges to try and keep it nice and neat. I think this one might need to be just a smidge darker. So I'm gonna rinse my brush, and I'm gonna take the tiniest amount of red, mix it in with it, and I'm gonna repaint that one. So if you get going and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem quite right, go back and touch it up. Okay, once you have your tints painted all the way up to your pure color, now we're going to practice blending them, because your optical illusion art will require you to do some blending as well. So the first thing I like to do is start with a medium color. Top circle, we're gonna practice creating like an ombre or a gradation or a gradient where it switches from one color to the next. Then I'm going to take my lightest pink here, and I'm going to paint this right above. I probably should have started by painting the lightest one first. We're gonna start with our lightest and then move down. Okay, so we've got this painted. Now where the two colors meet, we wanna take our brush and blend into that medium color. So we wanna have enough paint on our brush that we are able to mix those two together. So we are doing our mixing right on our paper. I can even dry my brush off a little bit, so I'm getting extra paint off on my paper towel. And I go back and I'm just working with the paint that I have on the paper. You have to do this while your paint is still wet. You can't do your blending after your paint has dried. So then I can dip my brush back into this medium pink, and I can do a little layer here along this bottom edge, so that I have nice wet paint to do my blending with. And then I can go ahead and grab some of this darker pink and do my next layer with my darker pink. So again, just grabbing some of that, placing it right next to it. And then again, I'm gonna wipe the extra off on my paint palette on my paper towel. And I'm just going to take my brush now and rub that darker pink, or blend it up into that medium pink. So I'm just going along that line using what I call a dry brush, so it doesn't have a ton of paint on it. And I'm just going over that edge a little bit with this brush until it starts to blend and I can't see where one starts and the other stops. So that makes a nice clean edge. I can rinse out my brush real good because I have some lighter value on here, or a lighter tint on here. So my brush is completely clean. And now I'm ready to take some more of this dark pink here. I'm gonna scoop some in. So we have nice, fresh, dark pink here. And then now I'm going to take my pure color and I'm going to blend it with that one. So my brush is clean. I'm gonna take my pure red, go right next to it here, So the rest of the circle is going to be red, but I'm going to work to blend this area right here. I have too much red in my brush, so again, I kind of dry it out because I want my dry brush to do the blending. And then I take my brush and I work a little bit of that red up into that dark pink. So this is what we call blending. Now, if you get a hard edge right here, I can rinse my brush out, get some more of that darker pink, and add another layer right over it. And I can bring the darker pink into the red, so I have maybe a little bit more control if I'm bringing the dark pink into the red. So what we're trying to do is create an ombre or a gradation or a gradient where we have it change from light to medium to dark. So you can see I have this nice gradient going on right through there. So that is how you would blend from light to dark.